A very warm welcome for those who just joined us. This is the November 2023 session of the Spencer webinar series, and it's our last session for the year. Womp, womp, womp. We won't be hosting a session during December just because of the holidays, and I know you all have exams and quizzes and tests and whatnot, so we'll definitely pick it back up again in January. If you're not familiar with Spencer, we are a nonprofit organization that supports future leaders of this industry, which is all of you that are here with us today. It's college students that are pursuing careers within risk management, insurance, actuarial science, and we support students and universities through our various programs such as scholarships, which, by the way, I wanted to take a moment to highlight scholarships because that program is open right now. I'm going to share my screen for a second, so hopefully all of you can see this screen over here. Again, go to our website, www.spencered.org. From there, you can go to our programs, navigate down to scholarships. It's going to bring you to this portal here. And as you can see, we award scholarships on all levels. So we have undergraduate, full-time masters, part-time masters, and the PhD scholarships will open up on December 1st. But if you are an undergraduate student or a full-time or part-time mastered student attending a university or college across the US or Canada, definitely check this out. Click on the button here. You can read through all of this information, which will talk about eligibility, the amount of awards that you can receive, and that sort of thing. So definitely check that out. While I'm here on this page, we are in process of administering our Spencer RIMS Risk Management Challenge. If you're not quite sure if your university is participating in this challenge or not, please feel free to reach out to me, send me an email, let me know what your university name is, and I will let you know if they're already participating. So yes, we can only have one team per university participating in this challenge every year. So again, if you're not quite sure if your university is participating and if you'd like to put a team together, definitely check out this webpage. I'll pop the link in the chat as well. And I would love for you guys to participate in the Spencer RIMS Risk Management Challenge. I'll also pop this link in the chat too, which is our Spencer webinar series, where, as you can see, we're here today, November 9th. As I mentioned, we're going to skip December. We'll pick it up again on January 11th. But this is where you can go through and you can start to sign up for some of the sessions that we already have in place for 2024. Fantastic. So with that, we do have an amazing guest speaker that is here with us today. Danielle Bohannon is a U.S. casualty broker at Lockton, and she is dialing in all the way from the UK. So with that, Danielle, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Tandika. I see we have a question in the chat before we get started. Can they apply for the scholarship if you graduate in spring 2024?
No, so the cycle is open until the end of January, and then we use February, March to go through the process of reviewing all of the scholarships that we receive. So funding is only distributed over the summer. So with that, you have to be back in class for the fall semester. So August, September onwards. Good question.
Okay.
Any other questions while we're here on the scholarships or anything else that I shared? Nope, no questions. All right, over to you, Danielle.
Okay. Well, thank you, Tandika, and thanks everyone for joining. Sorry about my clunky phone situation here. I had to dial in, but we'll be okay. Yeah, just really, I mean, the goal of today is for you guys to hopefully walk away understanding a little bit more about what a career in insurance can look like and fill you in on what mine has looked like. And really this hour today is whatever you guys want to make of it. So if you want to ask questions about Lockton or about London or about, you know, how I ended up here, we can talk about whatever you guys would like to focus in on. So this is kind of your hour to make what you'd like out of it. And feel free to come off mute or drop a question in the chat, but I do have a PowerPoint to kind of go off of, so I'm going to go ahead and share that. So first, I'll just kind of give an overview of Lockton. I've got Lockton KC pulled up and then Lockton London. So, I mean, Lockton was founded in 1966 by Jack Lockton, actually in his parents' basement in Kansas City. And since we've grown to a company of almost 11,000 associates in all parts of the world. We've got 140 plus locations, which allows us to have local market presence and kind of place business into those countries easily through another Lockton office. We've got 65,000 clients, and that is property and casualty. That's the employee benefit side of the house. Any line of insurance you can probably think of, Lockton's placing it, whether it's marine or political risk and trade credit. We're doing all lines of insurance and have all different types of clients. We grew 27% in fiscal year 2022, and that was not through acquisition or buying other companies and inheriting their revenue. That was through just adding more business to our book, which is awesome. And Lockton is the largest privately held insurance broker, which means that we don't face the pressures to meet a certain number at quarter end and have to make short-sighted decisions to appease, shareholders. We can do what's in the best interest of our company and our clients. Are there any questions on Lockton before I talk about where I come from?
Have you guys all heard of Lockton before? Give me a thumbs up either in the chat or through your cameras if you've heard of Lockton. Okay, I see a couple of thumbs up. Okay, so some
Awesome.
have heard
Can't see
of
the chat,
Lockton, others haven't. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll leave it here for a moment and just kind of talk about my experience with insurance and sort of how I got into it. I'm not sure if we have risk management majors on the line or if we have kind of all different backgrounds, but I grew up in St. Louis, and then I went to Missouri State University in Springfield. Go Bears. I was a marketing and sales major, so I was not privy to the RMI world. I have a minor in Spanish. I was mainly focused in college on running track and cross country. And really, one summer, I had stayed in Springfield to wait tables and just train. It was cross country season. I was running like 50 or 60 miles a week. And I remember a customer came into the restaurant where I was waiting tables, talking to the guy, trying to improve my tip and whatnot. And he said he was a runner too. And he said he's opening up an Allstate next door if I wanted a job where I didn't have to be on my feet all day. And I thought to myself that I would do anything, including sell insurance, to have a job where I could just sit down and not walk around all day after running so much. So took him up on the offer. I did have to get my property and casualty license to sell insurance. So I went for it. It was probably 19 or 20 at the time. I worked there maybe for a year, very, very part-time, because I was running. We had 1 or 2 practices a day. We're traveling every weekend. Safe to say I wasn't in the office a lot, but it was a good start to kind of get to know what insurance was. It was a good experience with cold calling and talking to people who don't want to talk to you. And we had people just kind of wander in the office and demand a quote for their auto insurance, and that's kind of not how that works. So, I mean, it was good character building, I suppose, but I knew I didn't want to do that forever, but I thought, okay, maybe insurance is something I consider. And one weekend, a girl on the swim team had come back to Missouri State. She graduated and moved to Kansas City and came back for a party. And I remember talking to her, and she was talking about how much she liked her job. And I said, okay, well, what do you do? And she said, it's insurance. You wouldn't really understand, don't want to talk about insurance with you at this party on a Saturday night. But I followed up with her because she seemed really happy, and she told me she worked at Lockton, and I made a point to introduce myself to Lockton at the career fair at Missouri State. And I mean, I really loved what I saw about the company. We've got a great internship, 8 weeks, learned a ton. You have a group project, you're doing real meaningful work. You can set up meetings with anybody you want to. And I really loved the internship. I knew I wanted to come back. So I joined Lockton as we've got this postgraduate development program in Kansas City, which I thought was really great because, you know, you get out of college and you don't want to stop learning. And I thought it was a good transition from college to work. So Lockton, this AAM program, we call it, you've got coursework, you've got tests and quizzes, and you have a peer group that you're going through everything with, all the while you're working a desk. I mean, you have clients and you're helping out there. And I was also studying for some insurance exams at the time. If you've heard of the CPCU or the ARM, those are good things to have under your belt. So did the program. It was awesome. After you're done, you sort of get placed in your permanent team. So what I was doing there was working on smaller middle market type business. And then I joined a team where we worked on large national accounts. So just bigger clients, like names that you would probably see when you're driving down the street. And really where London comes into play was about a year ago, actually now. My boss had called me into her office, which of course never feels great, unexpected. But she said, London's doing this thing. They want to hire someone from the US to go over to London, be a broker in the market, get experience, get to know the market, the coverage, and you can apply for this if you want to. So I thought, okay, never been to London. I've only actually worked with London once, but this is probably something I should go for. So there's a couple months of interviewing and I was really interested and it worked out. So I think I heard that I got the job maybe about a year ago, but I moved over in May and it took a ton of logistics, of course. I mean, it's a really far away from Kansas City and you've got to get a visa and, you know, what happens to my stuff and my workload and all of those good things we had to iron out. So now we can kind of get into, you know, for those of you maybe who aren't so familiar with insurance, like what is even an insurance broker? How does this work? How does London come into this whole thing? But any questions before we move on to that? And we can also leave some time for questions at the end if you want.
Yeah, I think those would all be great things to cover, you know, like what is a broker, you know, for those perhaps that are with us that haven't taken any RMI classes that might not know what a broker is. Alex Coffin did say, "Go Bears" in the chat.
Go Bears. I happen to know Alex played football at Missouri State.
Nice.
Okay, so we'll keep it moving here. So this at a very basic level is how my brain works on what procuring insurance looks like. And basically, so this is more like what I was doing at Lockton, Kansas City. So you have a client and, you know, again, I was working on some of maybe the bigger ones. Obviously don't want to name any names, but you have your client. They need a broker to place their insurance for them. And really the broker is the go-between between the client and the actual insurance providers. You can say carrier, you can say market. It's the person who's actually agreeing to pay in the event of a loss. So the U.S. broker, this is me at Lockton in this case in the middle, and my former role, you know, you take on a client and you say, okay, what do you do? Where do you do it? Let's look at how big is your fleet and how much payroll do you have and all of those things like that. Look at, you know, where is your coverage placed now? What are your deductible levels and are you comfortable with those? And you really just get to know your client so that you can then accurately represent them in the marketplace. So then as the broker, it's our job to hold relationships with the markets and say, okay, I've got this client, they do this. Call it, let's say it's a trucking client. I already know as the broker that certain markets are going to like trucking, certain markets aren't. So I can say, hey, I've got this company, they do this, they've got this many trucks, they're in these states, They have these really great safety fleet controls in place. Here's what their claims look like, etc. And I mean, the broker in the US does a lot more than just place the insurance. We're there all year round to go through claims projects, or, I mean, we're kind of your outsourced risk management. You know, you learn a lot about the clients that you're working on. And I'll go ahead and move forward, and then we can see if there are any questions. But here is kind of what, there's an added link in the chain. So if you think about here in London, what I do now, I'm a specialty broker, or you can call it wholesale, or I mean, that's what I'm doing. You have your US client, and I still work with the US brokers. So I'm working with Lockton, Kansas City, and Lockton, Denver, and whatnot. But when you have a client who the nature of their business is really risky, and I mean, we do place a lot of trucking risks over here, or we have some energy clients, and they have losses, they have big losses, it's tricky for them to find insurance, and it's maybe a scenario where the US markets aren't comfortable insuring that. So the chain goes from the client to the US broker, and the US broker can take it to the US markets, but typically what you'll see is once you start getting a lot of them say, I'm not comfortable with that, that's not something I really want to insure or write, the US broker can take it to your specialty broker, which could be me here in London. And I mean, I have the same function. That's my job here, is to hold relationships with, we'll call it the global market, with Bermuda markets, with London markets, we have a market in Ireland. I mean, I can technically place business wherever, I suppose, but the US gives us their client, and we say, okay, where do we think that would be a good fit within our marketplace? Any questions on that before we talk about London more specifically? Again, this is whatever you guys want to get out of it. We just talk about whatever. Can't see the chat, but I'll keep it moving.
No questions so far.
Okay. So here we have, this is a photo on the right of Lloyd's of London. It's a big 4-story building right in the heart of London. And as you can see, what goes on here is you can see these like wood panel, we call them the boxes. And basically our underwriters will sit there at the box, and the brokers come up and place business with them. So that's what you're seeing in the photo, but let's kind of backtrack. So Lloyd's of London is, you may have heard of that before. They are sort of, I mean, Lloyd's isn't providing any insurance. They're sort of just the governing body over all of their syndicates. So the syndicates could be, you know, there is a company, an insurance company called AXA XL in the US. Well, AXA also has a Lloyd's syndicate, and AXA also has an arm in Bermuda. So I can broker with Lloyd's of London markets with the syndicates. I can place business with company markets, which maybe it just means that you're writing on your own paper, so to speak. You don't have to sign on to like a standard coverage form. You can say, I'm based here and this is what I want to write. We also place business with Bermuda. So Bermuda is a sort of tax haven, and there a lot of insurance companies are set up there. So they've got over 1,000 reinsurers and insurers on the island, we say, in Bermuda. But back to Lloyd's, really, it's interesting. Lloyd started out, I think it was Edward Lloyd, had a coffee shop in London, and at the time, the way insurance really got started, maybe you guys have heard the story before, so please forgive me, but it was marine risks, where their ships were going out to sea, and it was almost a form of gambling. People were kind of placing bets on, not placing bets, but you know, you're saying, I'm willing to insure you if something goes wrong, if you lose part of your cargo, you pay me for my promise to pay you a greater sum later, but if nothing happens to your cargo, then I just get to keep the money. And Edward Lloyd's Coffee House sort of became that Lloyd's of, he's just providing the space for people to go and trade. And this is what you see here in the photo is you literally, I'm in an office in London, I take my portfolio or whatever, I walk over, you sit down in front of the underwriters and you say, okay, here's my risk, here's what they do. The idea of Lloyd's is just to house this trading that goes on, which is really cool. It's very lively in there. COVID did have somewhat of an effect on Lloyd's. I wasn't here for that, but they actually redid it over the summer, and I think it's kind of getting back to where it was. So I've got on here the real-time approach to broking and underwriting. For example, today we've got a renewal coming up on December 1st, and we're working on the wording. So it was on a certain policy form last year, and we're trying to make certain changes. And what I found in the US is it's interesting having worked in both the US and in London. In the US, you're calling your underwriters, you're sending emails to your underwriters, but they can kind of not answer your call or not answer your email, and maybe they're in New York and you're in Kansas City, and there's kind of a time change and you don't see them that much, maybe only a couple times a year. It's just a very different feel. And I also find that underwriters in the US, maybe it's that they have less authority, but it's a lot of, I'll have to check with home office. Oh, my system won't allow me to do this. Some of the wording changes that we were going back and forth on today that would have never, a US company would not be agreeable to changing their policy form, which I think is super interesting. So the difference here is pretty much all of the insurers in London are within this 1 square mile. So the city of London, while London is a big place and there are kind of different areas, sort of like New York. You call it New York, but there's really a bunch of little kind of silos. The city of London is 1 square mile, and I think I heard a stat a few days ago, there's like 270 insurance companies within the city. So we're all right here. It's really cool to be able to walk over to Lloyd's because we're all so close, just sit down together and say, okay, what are we trying to accomplish? What are your issues with this? What do I want to make sure I really advocate for? And it's still our job as the broker to be able to, even though I'm not the direct, US broker, I'm still having to say those things like talk about our fleet safety and the claims and know those things so that when I sit down in front of these people who ultimately have the authority to say yes or no and don't have to go back and get it referred or ask, or it, you still have to really know your stuff, but it's really cool to be able to walk away from a meeting and actually have a final answer and get stuff done and just kind of print out your papers and talk about it and go back to your desk. So, I mean, that's one of my favorite parts of being here. And there's also a more creative approach to insurance. If you think about, it's not just your standard, like if you think about your deductible on your car, maybe you have $1,000 deductible, and then that just means you're on the hook for $1,000, and then the insurance, the actual risk transfer comes into play after you've hit $1,000. So same with our clients really, and that's one of the functions of Lockton in the US is to be able to work with our clients and say, okay, you retain this amount of dollars before your insurance kicks in. Is that the right amount? Do you want to retain more or less? But what we can do in London, and what I'm mostly doing, is placing excess casualty coverage. So my policies that I'm dealing with sit excess of your general liability, your auto, your employer's liability. That's pretty much it. So we can think about, okay, maybe in order to try to achieve premium savings for the client, we can stretch this policy over 3 years and say, here's your limit of insurance for each occurrence. Here's your aggregate limit of insurance. Here's your policy limit of insurance. all of that doesn't have to make sense, but just saying that we have different ways of being creative instead of just, I give you premium, the client gives the insurance company premium, the insurance company says, yeah, we'll pay if you have a loss. Another thing we can do in London, we call them swing deals. So you could say, okay, if my losses, if the losses of the client are under X amount, then the insurance company will actually give you a little bit of money back. But if your losses are above a certain amount, they will make you pay a little bit extra. You can say that, okay, on my excess policy, I have a deductible one time, and after I have a claim that I've paid that deductible one time, then your first dollar. So it is really interesting, and maybe it's just insurance nerd, but I think it's cool to see how the mechanism of insurance can function with getting in front of smart people who are able to make decisions like we are here in the market. And it's not a terribly huge place. I mean, if you think about it, the U.S. in terms of the greater, global insurance marketplace, the U.S. is a weird, very litigious country that we sue each other. And one of the first things I heard in London here was someone say that Americans are expensive, and we are. And it's really weird how you'll have a trucking accident and get multi-million-dollar verdicts. And it is a niche marketplace in London to have underwriters specifically dedicated to insuring companies overseas in the US. I mean, that was kind of a change that you don't really think about having grown up in the US, but it's really interesting.
So there is a question in the chat that popped up from Michael Lombardi. Hello, Michael. He says, it sounds like working in London is a much more personal and face-to-face interaction. Do you enjoy that? And how much does your relationships and reputation matter in getting results? How do you establish your reputation and relationships in a new country? And what do you miss about the US?
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you, Michael. That was quite a few questions. I would say in London, yes, I really do love the personal aspect of the relationship because we are in the same place as our markets. I think we feel a bit closer, and that our markets are a little bit more willing to get to yes and work with us. In terms of how do you establish your relationship in the marketplace, I think that comes from going out and shaking hands and doing all of those things, but also being credible when if you don't know something, saying that you don't know and you'll have to go check on it, or coming prepared to Lloyd's, knowing your story, knowing your claim history, and knowing that, okay, this company was on in 2019 when they had a loss, but this company wasn't on, in different years. I think it's about knowing your stuff, about showing up to things and being prepared, really. But I do like the face-to-face nature of the London market. I think it's really cool.
Fantastic. Any other questions while we're here? Michael says, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this is the end of my presentation, but whatever else we'd like to talk about, this time is yours.
Fantastic. Jasmine, I see you have your camera on. Lorianne, I saw you unmuted. Any questions so far? So I do see a question in the chat from Jonathan Still. He says, has Lloyd's ever faced any challenges in the current market?
Yes, I can assure you the answer is yes, but is there anything specific to dial in on? Challenges in what way? I mean, I guess I could talk about the casualty market is in a really tough place post-COVID, and just, the number of losses that have happened in the last few years, namely in the auto space, have really, really affected our market. And we haven't really seen any rate decreases in our premium. If you look at, okay, the rate's made up of how much of your premium is driven by exposure growth, and then how much premium is we need to add in a little bit for claims inflation and just, you know, social inflation. Things are becoming more expensive. So in terms of challenges in the current market, I mean, the casualty space is fairly challenged at the moment with a number of factors at play here.
Jonathan
I
says,
see.
thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. I see Michael asked, I see the big question now. What do I miss about the US? First thing that comes to mind is food, candidly. Food here is not so great, honestly.
You don't enjoy the English food? No?
No, ma'am. Not a big egg and mayo girl, not a big prawn girl, all of those things. But that's kind of the whole point of coming over, is that things are different. And, you know, it's when you first get here, for me, was starting a new job, living in a new place, eating new food, you have a new routine, but that's also the very nature of why we would do something like this and send people over. So it's all good things, really. I'm thankful for the change.
Hi,
do I eat beans on toast? Oh, go. That was not an important question.
Oh, sorry.
Go for it.
So, hi, I'm Samira. I'm a master's student, and I'm studying actual science and risk management. So, I'm really interested in everything you've said, your experience and everything. And I once applied to Lockton, but when you look at all the job posting, they are looking for juniors mostly. So how can graduate students like get into companies? Because to get a full-time position, you need to have experience, and we are still at school. We don't really have like experience. So how can we do and apply?
Good
Yeah. So would you be
question.
looking at an internship or full-time or?
Yeah, full-time.
Okay. I mean, I would say you can check out the website. You could try to find someone on LinkedIn and reach out. I mean, any way you can try to get in contact with somebody. I mean, share your resume, and we can link the careers page if you want to follow up with that information on Lockton's website. But yeah, I say go for it.
Well, and also, I wanted to know if you know that if they consider international students for those positions, because I know some positions do not sponsor. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't know for certain, but I think it's something you should definitely ask about. I don't know if I'm the right person to ask about that, but I would definitely inquire if I were you.
Yeah.
And I just posted the Lockton's career page in the chat box. And where are you dialing in from, Samir, or which school do you go to?
Georgia State University.
Nice. Awesome. Very cool. So I was going to say, you could always look to connect locally. So like if you're looking for either internships or full-time job opportunities within a specific like city or state, like Atlanta, Georgia, you could always look to connect with those HR representatives, the human resources representatives that are local here in the city. But Jasmine, go for it. I see you have your hand up.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Danielle, for sharing your experience with us. I just wanted to know, how is Lloyd's using new technology to create better efficiencies for clients to access broken houses and syndicates?
Yeah, that's a good question. Honestly, I'm sure there are a lot of things that Lloyd's is doing that I don't know about, but one of the really cool things I've heard about is there is a syndicate called, it's like IQUW. I believe that's what it is. I forget who it's associated with, but basically it's sort of AI based. So if you have another syndicate who will agree to write something, then this signs on automatically and provides a certain amount of insurance just because this other person wrote it. So essentially, this IQUW, I want to say it's backed by Google or something. They are trusting the underwriting scrutiny of this other company and just signing on, which is really cool. And they actually have a box in Lloyd's, but I'm sort of like, if you're digital, why do you spend money on a box in Lloyd's? But I don't know. I haven't written anything with them. I will say Lloyd's is doing all kinds of innovative stuff, and their website is a really good place to check out. They've got Lloyd's Lab. They've got, I believe they're insure some really exciting space risks at the moment. I mean, if you think about Lloyd's, any major event pretty much within the last however many years, like think about 9/11 or just some of the big publicized losses, we would call them, but just historical events like that, those events are backed by Lloyd's pretty much. I mean, the syndicates at Lloyd's are who's coming together to pay those claims. And yeah, I'm sure Lloyd's is doing a lot of innovative things that I don't know about at the moment, but I encourage you to check out the website.
Sure, we do. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
There's another question in the chat box as well from Brian. He asks, how are syndicates using new technology to assist insureds with claims handling, adjustments, payments? So for example, drones for wildfires in California and things like that.
Yeah, I don't know that that's necessarily a function of Lloyd's more than it would be with sort of like we would call it a TPA. So like if you're a client and you take a big retention, you hire a company essentially to handle the claims underneath your retention. I would think more that's your third party there who would be dealing with that. But I mean, I know that Lloyd's and all of our markets would want to do anything to get claims paid as soon as possible. And that is one of the benefits of, I mean, in the London market, we do a lot of quota share placements. So what that means is if you're buying $10 million of insurance, you might not get it all from one insurance company. You typically do have a lot of people sign on at different levels of capacity. So you'll have one market, call it Hiscox, they'll say, okay, I'll put up 2.5 million. You'll have another Allied World, they'll put up 2.5, and you'll have a bunch of people come together to make your $10 million limit. But what that allows is all of these markets come together, we call it a slip. They'll all sign the same slip, which is your quote, and then it becomes your policy, which can sometimes be confusing, but you have the benefit of, when you have a shared layer like that, many claims experts working to get your claim paid out as soon as possible. You have a lot of longtime professionals working on it, and they all have a shared interest in getting the claim paid and closed so that it doesn't develop further and potentially turn into something worse. So I would say the London market is good for claims in that sense. I don't know that they're doing anything to necessarily related to, can't speak on the wildfires and drones in California, but hopefully that helps.
Oh, good point. Great question. I have a question as well. For any of the students that are here with us today that are based in the US, that perhaps have never even left the US and are thinking about doing something similar to what you did, so transitioning to a new country as a working professional, what advice would you have for them to just help them along that journey?
Yeah, I think one of the big components is just being willing to go with the flow. I mean, you agree and you want to do this thing, but there's actually a lot that has to happen to go into it. And if taking an international role is something that you want to do, I encourage you to say that, whether you're at an internship and, people aren't going to know if you don't say what you want. So if you're in a job and you are really interested in going over to London, when you sit down with your boss quarterly or however long, you say, this is something I'm interested in doing. But in terms of actually adjusting, I think you just have to know that it's going to work out and it's going to be okay. And I hadn't actually been to London before I moved here. My first time was a one-way flight on my way over with 2-3 suitcases, but I just thought, as long as I'm somewhere where I can get up and have my coffee in the morning, it's going to be totally fine. I'm at an office with a desk, I sit in front of a computer, you just have to kind of envision, like, whatever it is, it's going to be okay. And you have to go with the flow, because there's a lot that you just can't plan for. But I would encourage anyone to do it, because you learn a lot about yourself and your work ethic and all of those good things.
Fantastic advice. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah, please go for it.
So I wanted to know, as a casualty broker, what kind of analytical tools do you use on a daily basis? Because I interned in a insurance brokerage company, and we had to build and populate the triangles, the trains, and all that on Excel, and also do some simulation with at risk. So I wanted to know if those are things that you do on a daily basis or not.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's really interesting. So in an actuarial sense, I would mostly use those things in the US when you're dealing with a client, maybe talking about, like, what's the appropriate retention level for them. And, if you had this retention in this historical year, here's what it would have looked like, and using those actuarial models and the triangles to kind of predict forward as well. But in terms of the tools that I can use now, one really interesting tool that Lockton has, we take all of our Lockton clients and compile limit benchmarking. So you can group together by NAICS code, essentially, kind of like what your business description is. You can say, okay, there are a few like clients who are all truckers. Their fleet is between 500 and 5,000 autos. Their revenue is between X and X. You can look at your peer group in that sense and say, what type of limit of insurance are they buying, just to kind of check yourself against them, which is cool. But I mean, really, it's up to the individual client and what their appetite for taking on risk is and how much insurance they want to buy. So while it's a good tool, it's not necessarily, we can't be prescriptive with it. And there are many caveats that you have to take into account with the model, because every business is just a little bit different. But another one, Lockton in the US has a tool called dynamic capital modeling, where you can see if it would be cheaper for you to retain the risk yourself or to buy risk transfer, to buy an insurance policy. So do not know the things that go into that model, but it's very interesting and can be beneficial to see when we take a client over to retaining a certain layer. It's cool to see how that plays out. So I love seeing using the tools that we can on this kind of stuff. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great question. We do have a few questions in the chat from Stephanie Darden. She asks, what are some challenging aspects about being a specialty broker? What is your greatest professional achievement? And what's the Lockton culture like in London, and your favorite part about living there?
Sure, all good questions. Maybe challenging aspects of being a specialty broker. I mean, so we work with the US and we are very far away. There is a time change. If I worked with someone in California that's 8 hours away, we're kind of missing each other, basically. I mean, working on US business, I work with Bermuda, I work with London. I'm available, I'm online, but it can be tough. The physical distance is tough, and we're communicating by email and by phone, and you do lose some of the connectivity and some of the story, and everything moves pretty quickly. So kind of what's the latest, we can kind of miss out on some of that. But working Lockton to Lockton, that does help us be interconnected a lot more. I mean, especially for me, the people that I am working with now, I sat next to some of them in the US, which is really cool. Let's see what there was another, what's my greatest professional achievement? I don't know. I probably coming here. I don't know. What's the
Yeah, I think
culture
that's an
like?
amazing achievement. Absolutely.
Thanks. What's the culture like in London, and my favorite part about living here? The culture, I think on the whole, people are a bit more reserved. Us Americans on the line are pretty, we can be loud, we can be outgoing, and I think that's very apparent when you're the only one of something. I mean, there are other Americans in the market, but not really. And I'm the one with the funny accent who doesn't know certain words and doesn't get certain jokes and all of those things. But that works both ways. There are things, yesterday I said party foul and I said elbow grease, and nobody got those two things. So fine, we're educating each other. But yeah, the culture is a bit different. It is cool. I mean, there's a place in London called Leadenhall Market where if you've seen Harry Potter, you can look it up. It's I don't know exactly what it is in Harry Potter, but a lot of brokers and underwriters, you'll see a lot of the market in Leadenhall on a Thursday night. Everyone's kind of grabbing a drink and hanging out. So it's a social culture, but I mean, there's plenty to do here. There's a lot to see on the weekends. You're in a very central spot to travel the world. So all of those things are really cool.
Fantastic. So we will be coming up on time shortly. I'm just popping a couple more links in the chat for everyone. Any final questions that are out there? Stephanie says, thanks for answering, Danielle. Any other questions before we wrap up our session here today? And if not, Danielle, do you have any final words of wisdom, perhaps, or maybe things you would have done differently?
I think I would just say thank you for joining the call, and there's no secret in your career to getting what you want. It's about hard work and asking questions if you don't know and doing your best, and that's all you can really do. And I hope that a career in insurance sounds interesting to you, but if there's any way I can at all be helpful or answer questions, you can find me on LinkedIn. But it was a pleasure talking with you guys today, and thanks for joining.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here. I did put Danielle's LinkedIn path in the chat as well, so please feel free to connect with her. And as she mentioned, if you have any other questions or want to connect offline with her, please feel free to do so. So as mentioned before, we won't have a session this December due to exams, quizzes, tests, and whatnot, and the holiday season being right around the corner. So our next session will be on Thursday, January 11th. It'll be from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Our presenting company will be Burns and Wilcox, and we're going to learn about specialty lines of insurance. So feel free to reach out to us again if any questions. If you're not quite sure how to register, check out our website. Each session has individual Zoom links that you can click on and register for. And we look forward to catching you next time. Thank you again, Danielle, for your time. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, guys.
A good one. Bye.
Yeah.